Board Gaming with Education, a podcast for anyone curious about how games and education mix. We explore various topics like game-based learning, gamification, and board games, and the impacts they have on learning. Here's your host, Dustin Stats.
Hey everyone, welcome again to another episode of Board Game with Education. In this episode, we are going to preview Season 11. So if you're new here, I'm Dustin Stats, and on this show and in our community, we chat all about games for learning. That could be game-based learning, gamification, board games for learning, or any other games. So if you want to get involved with our community, we have our Facebook community. That's game-based learning, gamification, and games and education. Or you can sign up for our email community, and that's at boardgamewitheducation.com. You'll find that on our website as maybe the second thing down. So those are two ways to kind of get involved more with our community of games for learning. But today, on this episode, I want to share with you what to expect for our season 11 of the podcast. Can't believe it. This is season 11. We're going to hit 150 episodes this season. That's a pretty big milestone, and we're excited for that. And at the end of the episode, I do have a kind of special announcement, so stay tuned for that. Some exciting stuff that I want to talk about. But before that, I want to chat about Season 11. So just like our Season 10, you'll notice in Season 11 the similar format where we have on some guests. And with those guests, there is a co-host, myself and a co-host, and we chat about a particular topic. So we dive into one topic with that guest, and then myself and the co-host have a follow-up discussion about that topic. So some of the awesome guests that we have lined up so far this season, we are still adding a couple more guests. So if you're interested in coming on the show, reach out to me, podcast@boardgamingwitheducation.com. But the guests that we have lined up, our first episode is going to be with Carl Rahenkamp, and we talk about using games to reinforce content versus introducing new content. So we really dive into those topics of when you would use a game to reinforce content or when you would bring a game into the classroom to introduce some new content and some pitfalls and some, benefits of doing either of those two things. Next up, we have Eric Agudelo, who we chat about diversity and inclusion in games. So we chat about what that means and why it's important. We also have a conversation with Jeff Engelstein where we talk about what we can learn about life from games. So he wrote a book called Game Tech, and it talks about the life lessons we can learn through games. Really awesome book. Highly recommend checking that out as well. Followed up with that conversation, we have a similarly related conversation, but we look at the life through the lens of a game designer. So how we can look at life and get more out of life by looking at certain things as a game designer. Another guest we have lined up for this episode or this season is Zdenek Lucas, and we talk about something really dear to me, and that's board games for learning English. So you know that my background is in English language teaching, and him and I kind of geek out a little bit about this discussion. I'm always excited to talk about using games to learn language. So those are some of the conversations and topics you can expect this season. And again, we are looking for a couple more guests. If you are interested in being on the show, reach out to me, podcast@boardgamewitheducation.com. We will have a couple bonus interview episodes. We had a couple of those last season. Those are interview episodes where we really just highlight that individual and what they're doing related to games for learning. So whether they're designing a game, running an organization, running a publishing business in games, whatever it may be, we talk about that guest and kind of what they're doing to promote games for learning. So that's what you can expect for season 11. And I know I said I have an exciting announcement, so I'm excited because season 12 will be different on the podcast, but I'm really excited for what we are planning to focus our content on coming up. So we're going to take the next month or two to look at content we deliver to the Games for Learning community and Board Game with Education community and revamp our plans for content. So what does that mean? Well, we often do this. We've done it with the podcast several times. The podcast was originally Board Game with English, and we've went to Board Game with Education, and we've kind of changed some of the formats of our episodes. We do this based on feedback and also based on what works for us. And it's important to us to hear from you what is working and what isn't working. So again, My email, if you have any suggestions as we move forward into new content, podcast@boardgamingwitheducation.com. And what our new content is going to look like? Well, we're really going to focus on video content. So we ventured down this path on YouTube a bit in the past, and you can check out some of the videos we've done on YouTube. Our YouTube channel is just Board Game with Education. We've done videos, games for remote learning. So this is a kind of a long video, and that's something we're learning about creating content, video content. This is about a 25-minute video, but we talk about different games you can use or types of games you can use for remote learning. We have other videos about what is game-based learning, some basic information about that and why you should use game-based learning in your classroom. We also look at some science-based games for learning and other related content. So we've done this before, and I learned a lesson. I went too gung-ho. I guess I envisioned myself being able to put out a video once a week, and it does take me a long time to edit video content. The podcast already took about 10 hours a week, so adding on video content was kind of a lot, kind of too much. So we are looking at how can we create video content, because we think board games really lend themselves better to a visual medium instead of the audio medium. So, but I don't want to lose what we do on this podcast. So there are deep conversations we get into on this show, and they're invaluable information, invaluable content, very useful, very insightful. I know they are, because I learn a lot in these conversations, and we don't want to lose these things going forward. So we're still going to have these conversations, but there's going to be more of a focus visually. So we're not 100% sure what this will look like just yet, whether that's streaming the conversations and then uploading the podcast onto the podcast later, or creating an edited video and posting that on YouTube as well as the podcast. We're still brainstorming, because we don't want to make it too. We want to make sure we're being efficient with how we're creating the content as well on our end. Because again, like I mentioned with the YouTube channel, I was too gung ho, and I maybe overpromised on myself and to everyone that was following along how often we would publish content. So we want to make sure two things. One, we're being efficient. We're doing something sustainable. We're also creating content that our audience and the community as a whole enjoys. And we don't want to lose the experience that you have from a podcast normally. So we're still brainstorming. We'll probably try a couple things out between now and the end of this season. But by the end of season 12, we'll have a new plan for how we release content. And with that, I kind of want to mention something else that we've been doing, kind of experimenting with, is our Instagram channel. So if you've been following our Instagram channel, again, just Board Game with Education, that's where you can find us all across the web. I've been going live every Friday. And every Friday, I talk about some things behind the scenes with Board Game with Education, and I talk about some games that we've been playing personally, and as well as some games we have in our store. Some things we've done on that channel also are doing some unboxing videos. We've just done one so far, and that was for By the Vote, a game about the electoral process. We also have another one coming from Restaurant Rivals coming very soon, so excited to have that on the channel as well. And then we have an About a Game series. So this is a really quick overview about a specific game on our website and why it's great for learning, or why it's great for creating a great, nice experience with board games with your family, or again, for homeschool learning or classroom learning. So we're excited to kind of experiment with some of this video content and the video medium. So again, though, if you have any suggestions, any questions, reach out to me, podcast@boardgamewitheducation.com. And finally, as always, thank you for listening in. Before we go, though, I'm always super curious to hear what you are playing. You can let me know about what games you're playing in two ways. One, I always post on the weekends on our Facebook community. Again, that's game-based learning, gamification, and games and education. I always ask on the weekends what you're playing or what you're planning to play. We have a lot of people engaged there, and it was really cool to read some of the games that people were playing this weekend. We had things like ESL Space Team, which is a I guess, a really cool game for ESL. I've never played it, but it was cool to learn a little bit about it. I think someone else said they were playing Calico. Another one was King Domino. So another one was Mariposa, which was really cool to hear that they had picked up that game because they played Wingspan by the same designer, Elizabeth Hargrave. So awesome to see some of those things. So you can let us know in our Facebook group, Game-Based Learning, Gamification, and Games for Education, or again on Friday. Every Friday I ask you what you're playing and I share what I'm playing on Instagram. That's Fridays. I go live Friday mornings, 8:30 Pacific Standard Time. So recently my wife and I played Scythe. So that was really cool. We finally got it to the table. It's the first game we played all year. We didn't play till January 18th. So we went over 2 weeks without playing a board game. But I think hopefully we'll get some more games to the table pretty soon. And like I mentioned, Restaurant Rivals will be having a video on Instagram about that soon, because hopefully we'll play that hopefully today when this podcast comes out. All right. So again, thank you for listening. And if you have any questions, you can reach me, podcast@boardgamewitheducation.com, and we'll see you next week with our first episode of season 11.
Thank you for listening in this week. If you liked what you heard, be sure to let us know. You can find us on social media as Board Gaming with Education or BGE Games, or email us at podcast@boardgamingwitheducation.com. If you want to support our podcast, be sure to check out our support page on our website. As always, teach better, learn more, and most importantly, play more. Thank you for listening, and until next time.